Williams to inbound. Simpson with it for the lead. 1.7. 1.7. Long shot goes in.
All right, hello everyone, and welcome to Basketball in the Mountains. This is the second episode. I am your host, Tyler King. Thanks everyone who listened to the first episode with Vinny and Justin, where we talk Nuggets and Colorado State. But today we're going to be talking Colorado basketball and the Buffs and the other team that I cover pretty heavily. And there's plenty of reason to talk about the Buffs because they actually have finally won a game in the Big 12. They're now 1-13. Plenty of bad history they avoided with the win over UCF the other day. And no person I'd rather have on to talk about the Buffs is Troy Finnegan from CU Sports Report, who is the person who I probably talk about hoops with the most, I feel like, offline. Just talking hoops all over the country. But Troy and I talk about the Nuggets a lot as he's a big Nuggets fan. And I go to a lot of the games. But Troy and I cover the Buffs together. So Troy, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really, really excited for this.
Yeah, so we're obviously going to talk about the big win the other day for the Buffs, 76-63 over UCF. I wasn't able to make it in person because of the snow. I was planning on going up to Colorado State for their game against Wyoming, but didn't make it to either because of the snow the other day. Just came at a weird time, but obviously got a chance to watch it at home. And just an interesting game. Like, I don't think CU played all that well, but they still were able to kind of pull away at the end. I mean, UCF was not very good either. That's a team that probably should have beaten in Orlando. That, I don't know if anybody remembers, that was the 1-point game where they had a chance to win at the end. I think the Buffs led by 10 at some point in the second half and blew it. It was one of the games that they really could have won. But Troy, what was your takeaway just from watching the Buffs finally get a conference win? I think it was mid-December the last time they won a basketball game.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, really happy for them. They've really been battling and fighting, and so it was really nice to see them kind of get on the board. But you nailed it. I went into the game expecting them to win based on the first game, like you said, and I thought they actually played some decent basketball against Houston and against Kansas. And I think just they had a talent problem in those games, and they didn't really keep playing that well on Saturday against UCF. But I know we'll get into the specifics, but I really liked, obviously what they did on the glass was a really, really big deal. And I thought they really defended pretty well for the most part. UCF is not blowing anyone away on offense but they take a ton of contested shots, but CU deserves some credit for making them take a lot of those shots late in the clock. So this was it was kind of I was thinking about it was kind of a Tad Boyle. That was a Tad Boyle win. Dominate the boards, make them work late in the clock, make them take tough shots. I think UCF only ended up shooting like 33 or 34% in that game. So it's a win that Tad will be proud of. And I was just really, really happy to see them get on the board, because while they have been poor at times this season, I think, to say the least, I don't think that they have been bad enough for them to get totally skunked in conference play. So this team deserved a win.
Yeah, for sure. They definitely did. And I think you're exactly correct that they have been battling. And I agree that they have been playing really a lot better as of lately. Like, I was impressed with them in the Houston game. Like, that is Houston. I wrote this kind of after that game. Like, Houston is exactly what Tad Boyle wants his program to be, and it's exactly what it would look like if he was able to get the kind of players he wanted to get as well. And the Kansas game, I thought they competed really well too. I mean, you're exactly right. They just have a talent deficiency against teams like that. Top 25 teams, top 20 teams in the country that are going to be playing in the NCAA tournament this year. Like, there's not really a ton you can do outside of your opponent having just a terrible shooting night to really overcome that kind of stuff. But against teams like UCF, where there isn't as much of a talent gap, Colorado, we'll get into this too later in the podcast when we talk about just why the season has gone the way it has, is the reason they are where they are is because they probably have the worst roster in the conference, just talent wise. I mean, I haven't seen everyone in person, but I've seen most of the conference at this point. And it just feels like they're at such a deficiency there. But against teams like UCF, the talent gap is not nearly as sharp as it is with the top teams in the conference, and that's where just good coaching and good discipline can come into play, which is ironic because, I mean, Colorado did turn the ball over 19 times in the UCF game and had some of those really, it's every game with this team with some of those mind-boggling, just like some of the worst passes you've ever seen. Like it's not as much as just them getting hounded on the perimeter, which does happen at times because they just don't have enough ball handling. But some of the passes are just, and turnovers are just really mind-numbing, and you have no idea how whoever it was decided to make that pass or whatever they did there. But I think one of the other things that stood out to me from the game was that they do have a good formula for winning these tight games, I think, now. They played a shorter rotation, like there was no Harrison Carrington.
Mm-hmm.
Felix Caceres didn't really play, so it was only 9 guys deep, which I think they should have been doing all along. But I get in the transfer portal era, you want to appease guys and try to give them as much minutes as possible. But like nobody had a big scoring night. Like I think Andrei Akimovsky had 15 to lead the team. Julian Hammond had 11. Sebastian Ronchik, who I want to talk about a little bit later, had 10. But like you said, they just dominated the glass. They got 16 offensive rebounds, 17 second chance points, which is something they haven't really done in much of these Big 12 games. And they were just able to, they only had 11 assists on 25 makes. Like the offense was still not great, but they were able to do what they need to do defensively. And I mean, a team like UCF, like it was all Keyshawn Hall and Darius Johnson. Like those are their 2 really main guys, and they were able to kind of limit their efficiency in the game. So, I mean, did you feel like that they finally have, whether it's the shorter rotation or just really leaning into crashing the glass hard, they finally have found a recipe here for any of the winnable games they have left on the schedule?
Yeah, I think they're getting there. The winnable games, which may only be one game at this point. We'll see about Kansas State, but TCU at home is probably really the only one. I think they're getting there. I do like the shorter rotation, like you said, but I do understand like when you're losing game after game after game, and Tad has said as much to us. He's been like, I'm kind of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. So I get trying to play 10, 11 guys, trying to experiment just to see if something works. But I do like the shorter rotation, especially in this game. I thought, in over the course of this game, you had a formula that was winning for you. You're rebounding the ball really well. You're playing really good defense. I liked kind of sticking with those lineups. It's really encouraging to me that they were able to generate some offense, from all over the place, even with Julian Hammond not shooting the ball very well, which at times this year when Julian Hammond isn't shooting the ball well, they haven't really known where to go. He got to the free throw line a couple times, which was big. But yeah, I do like you said, I do think, I don't know about in a close game against a good team. Like we saw this, Houston is an extreme example, obviously, but we saw this against them where I'm still not really sure they have the solutions offensively, to win a close game against teams that can really, really guard them. But in a game like this, where the talent disadvantage isn't as bad and they have kind of a formula that's really working for them, I do think it was encouraging to see them adjust and stick to that throughout the game, and they were able to pull away in the second half.
Yeah, that's a good transition into what I want to talk about mostly on this podcast, was like the overarching issues with this team and why they are where they are. Like, I don't think anybody expected them to be an NCAA tournament team this year, maybe even not an NIT team this year, because I don't even think they can get back to 500 even if they win out the rest of the way. And I think Tad Boyle knew going into this year that it was going to be a rebuilding one as well. But just the overall issues, I think, for the team have been more exaggerated than some people expected. The lack of ball handling, I think, was always going to be an issue when you lose someone like KJ Simpson and you didn't have like a natural on-ball replacement for that kind of guy. Julian has been a serviceable, and I think he's a solid player in the Big 12. I think he's a starting caliber player in the Big 12, but if he's your best player, that's where you run into some issues. And the grad transfer guys maybe haven't had as much of an immediate impact as you would have expected. And I don't even know if Tad had that high of expectations because he's just so used to the era where Derek White can come in and sit on the bench for a year and just practice, and then he gets to dominate his second season with the team. Whereas guys like Trevor Baskin and Elijah Malone and Andre Yakimovsky have 1 year, and they've got to use it. This year they can't really sit out and use a year to just get used to the system. So maybe there was just some, I don't know if bad projections or just, but it coming into the year, I don't think anybody expected them to be even this bad, even if they were expected to be near the bottom of the Big 12. I mean, is it just a lack of talent for you that sticks out for when you're watching this team? Like, what's the biggest overall issue that maybe you feel like has led to why they are 1-13 now in Big 12 play?
Yeah, the lack of talent. I think the guys that they got in the portal, what they really don't have is shot creation to me. I think coming into the year, we thought that Trevor Baskin might provide some of that. We thought that maybe RJ Smith could provide some of that. Obviously, Julian does that, but Julian is kind of he's played well this year. He has been the best player on the team, but I also feel like he's miscast a little bit with this roster. I don't think he is being forced to be the point guard, and I think that he's better off. He's a score first guard. I think that he would be better off as more of a combo guard, more of an undersized two guard. We saw it last year. He played alongside KJ in a lot of those lineups. But yeah, the talent, I think the lack of athleticism on the perimeter has been an issue. They're pretty athletic inside. Obviously, Bangot Dak has been good this year for the most part, and he's a freak. But I think, especially on the wing, I think that they are just kind of overmatched in a lot of these matchups in a really, really good league, where all of these teams have got big wings, athletic wings, guys that can do a lot of stuff on the perimeter. And CU, I don't think really has that. I also just I think we've talked about this before too, but I think if they had, and you mentioned this too with Julian being the best player, if they had a true, the best player and everybody could bump down a role and Julian could be the second best player and everybody could move down one rung as a result, I do think that a lot of them would look a lot better in that context. But I just think that, and that kind of goes back to them not having some of the identity that Tad has talked about and that we've talked about. But yeah, really the lack of talent and I think just they're overmatched, especially on the wings with they've got G5 players at a lot of spots where you need Big 12 players to win games.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. This is something I've said a lot to people when they ask me what the heck is going on with this team. There's just no guy. Last year they had KJ and Tristan Da Silva, who were both all Pac-12, even KJ, all-American caliber players that you need to get to be an NCAA tournament team. And last year they could have used a lot of these players, frankly.
Totally.
There's a lot of guys on this team
Absolutely.
that would have been really helpful last season, especially in the NCAA tournament when Julian Hammond obviously missed much of the end of the season and never really got back to full health and never really got back in the rotation. But they're playing Tad's playing 6 guys in the Pac-12 tournament, in the NCAA tournament. They could have used Andre Yakimovsky, or this version of Bangot Dak, at any point, or even Trevor Baskin coming off the bench.
Yeah.
They could have used a bunch of these guys on last year's team just to give a spell, whether it's Javon Hadley or Luke O'Brien, just kind of that wing depth rotation surrounding the guys, like I said, with KJ and Cody Williams and Tristan Da Silva. They could use a bunch of these guys, but now that all those guys are gone, I think the way you put it is perfectly. They're all just all miscast, a slot or two ahead of where they should be on a team like this. And I think that's the overall issue going forward too, is that's the biggest thing that Tad Boyle, I feel needs to do, whether it's in the transfer portal, which I know he doesn't want to do, or whether he thinks he has it in the signing class coming up, which I want to talk about too, because it's a class of 5 guys that I'm really high on, but is there a guy in that class, or are you going to have to? We'll talk about this too, but I feel like you're going to have to maybe wipe the slate clean with this roster going forward. Keep the 2, 3, 4 guys that you really like. Add to the 5 incoming freshmen, and then maybe grab 2, 3, 4 transfer portal guys. Because I do think that is going to be necessary. Like, I don't think you can run it back with just the roster, the guys you have coming back, and the 5 incoming freshmen. Like, you've got to try something different, because I think the Big 12 is even better and more athletic, which you made the point of that too, like, than Tad Boyle expected. Like, they knew they were coming into a juggernaut league. The Pac-12 the last couple of years was really starting to fall off. I think they only got like 3 or 4 tournament teams last year, and that was because Oregon stole a bid as well. Like, it was only going to be like a 3-bid league regardless, and it was just like kind of like Arizona and everybody else the last couple of years. So, and now Arizona's the 4th best team in the Big 12, and that's kind of even a little bit of a surprise. Like, this is a loaded conference that you're going to have to just get better at, talent-wise, get better players. But I mean, is there anybody that you feel like in the upcoming class is capable of being a guy, or is there anybody that really sticks out to you that's coming in, or is it just they might have to look in the portal and just pray that they hit better this time around?
I think that in the near future, it's going to have to be a lot of portal stuff. I really like Josiah Sanders. I like Jalen Holland. But they are like, I don't know how to put this. I still think that Tad is going to have to get out of his comfort zone in the portal, not only with getting into the portal and bringing in talent, but I think the type of player that he likes to recruit, he needs to kind of branch out, not with every player, but with some players. Because even like, look, you're losing Julian Hammond, who's essentially the only shot creator on the roster right now. And Josiah Sanders and Jalen Holland are both, they can handle the ball, especially Josiah, but they're not great scorers right now at all 3 levels. Josiah Sanders' shot is going to be a work in progress, although he gets to the rim really, really well. Jalen Holland is more of an off-the-ball player, and he's kind of struggled to shoot at times during his high school career. I think that they really need somebody who can score in the portal, and Tad, and that's what you see in this recruiting class. You see Tad likes to recruit versatile players who play defense. They're going to play both sides of the ball, and that's great. But you can't, in this league where every team, like you mentioned, every team has guys that can guard. Every team, all of these guys have like, none of these teams are overmatched. You need guys that can score, even if that means you have to put a guy on the floor who is a weakness on the defensive end, as a liability on the defensive end. You need that guy, or you're going to run into problems like this year where you are kind of stuck in the mud offensively at times. So I think for this year or for next year, and probably even the year after that, I do think that Tad is going to kind of have to get uncomfortable in the portal. But like you said, we're both Josiah Sanders guys. I do really like this class. I'm excited about Ian Inman. Taco will be fun. Adding another big. We'll see how many bigs from this year are sticking around next year. But I'm excited about Taco. A lot of potential there. So I do like this signing class a lot. I'm very excited about it. But I do think like this is just kind of the way it is now. Like, you look at all of the teams at the top of the Big 12 right now. All of them are filling in the gaps with portal guys, and really, really high quality portal guys who are big time contributors. And I think that is just that's the way it is now. And that is what Tad's going to have to do.
Yeah. I think you made a really good point about the type of portal player that Tad is like to get. I mean, you look at Andre Akamovsky for years has been a perfect Tad Boyle player. Like, he's a pretty versatile offensive guy. I think he thought he could do more on ball than he really can in the league like this. I think if he was still at Washington State and he was in the WCC, like, he'd be awesome. But he tries really hard on defense, and he's the guy they go to be their kind of perimeter stopper on defense, and he's pretty solid at that. Like, I don't think they've gotten killed by individual performances much this season. Like, it's really just been the turnovers and the Houston game where they get killed on the glass and stuff like that. And then, like we've talked about, like the late game, they just don't have enough offensive creation to really compete in crunch time. But going forward, I think you're spot on. You need that high level guy. I do agree. I think Josiah Sanders is the best. Is the best hope in that regard for this upcoming recruiting class. I do like Ian Inman, like you said. I think he'll be a nice swing wing. Taco could be an interesting big guy. I do like Jalen Holland as well, but Josiah is definitely the guy who's definitely like an on-ball. He's got good size as a guard too at like 6'4". Like he's definitely able to get to his spot and get to the rim, like you've talked about. I think he's on the KJ Simpson path, if I had to guess. Like KJ was not a very good defender as a freshman and really got there by his junior year, where he was a really, really elite defender for that team last year. Aside from all the stuff he did on ball, I think that's kind of the mold you're looking for Josiah Sanders. But KJ Simpson was not KJ Simpson until really the back half of his sophomore year and then really his junior year. So you have to go into the portal and look for guys, like you said, like somebody who can be the star on this team and be the go-to guy. And I know the NIL issues have been a thing for CU and probably will continue to be a thing. But I don't know what the solution is there, but there has to be some kind of buy-in, and maybe the revenue sharing becoming a thing in the summer helps them a little bit more, and they're able to, because the football has done pretty well NIL wise the last couple of years. Like anybody who could see with them getting Julian Lewis and the bag he got, like football's doing okay NIL wise, at least for the top of the roster guys. But hopefully maybe the revenue sharing will allow the basketball program to have some more money to spend in getting some higher quality players, because that's the biggest deficit. Like you said, put it perfectly. Like look at all of the top teams in the Big 12. Like Houston has gotten LJ Cryer from Baylor. Like Arizona, Caleb Love. All of these guys at the top. Like even Texas Tech, their two best players are Mountain West guys. Like JT Toppin, who was at New Mexico last year, was the best freshman in the Mountain West. I watched him in person a bunch. He was really, really good. You just have to go in and try to get that. Maybe they thought Trevor Baskin was that guy because there were a lot of programs after him. I know that, like, for sure. Like, there was a bunch of top programs that were going after him, and he definitely showed more, I think, on his Mesa film than he showed this year, especially from, like, just a shot creation standpoint, shooting, and ball handling. But you definitely got to go in the portal and try and find that guy, even though I know Tad doesn't want to do that. Like, that is just not the way he wants to do this. But I think maybe he'll start to look around the conference, and either he'll accept it and start to change, or another similar season could be coming next season and he's not thrilled about it and maybe doesn't want to do this anymore. Like, that could be a thing as well. But we say all this. I do think there are plenty of players on the current roster that you want to keep going forward that could be real building blocks and really good players going forward. We've talked about this when we're at games. You feel like you don't want to – there's probably going to be some churn and a couple guys you probably encourage to move on, but there's a couple guys you really don't want to lose as well. And I think that the first name that comes to mind for me is Sebastian Ronchik. Like, the progress he showed over the last couple weeks, getting into the starting lineup, he's really done a great job at attacking closeouts and getting to the rim with his size. Like, I thought he might be more of a 4, but he's definitely capable of being a 3 at times as well. I think the shot still has some room to grow, which I thought was going to be the best part of his game. But I think in general, I've been so impressed with him. Like, he'll grab rebounds and push the ball up the floor. Like, I thought of him maybe just a shooting Euro big, but I thought of him as like the next Tristan da Silva for this team. But I think he could be even more versatile offensively. Defense, though, is a work in progress. But do you feel the same way about Sebi, that he's kind of the key guy you want to make sure you keep around going forward?
Yeah, we're big Sebastian Ronchik guys here. Your first point, you nailed it. I've been so impressed with the rim pressure that he's able to give this team, especially as Tad has kind of expanded his minutes here in the last couple of weeks. And the shot has kind of come and gone. I feel like earlier in the year, he had some games where he knocked down a lot of shots, and lately he's kind of slumping a little bit from the outside. But he's able to combat that by attacking the rim. He attacks the basket, man. He attacks closeouts really.
He really tries to draw contact and does
that
well.
Totally. He was going to go right at a shot blocker, try and draw a foul. So I really like the aggressiveness he plays with. I think he's rebounding the ball pretty well. You mentioned that the defense is going to come along, but I think offensively, there is a ton to be excited about with him. Just with the ability to be a guy on the second side who is not just like a guy who's going to stand there and shoot. Like if you swing him the ball, he can do stuff with it. He can get into the lane, create a paint touch, create a shot for somebody else, draw a foul. He could still, I think we both expect him to be a pretty good shooter over the course of his career. So I think offensively, there's a ton to be excited about with him. Obviously, the defense will come along, but I do think I think one thing that you and I were kind of hoping would happen was that he would start playing a lot of minutes here as the season's gone on, and that has happened. And you are starting to see him grow and play with a lot more confidence and play with a lot more freedom, which I think has really, really helped him showcase a lot of this stuff that I don't think I really expected to see from him in year one.
Yeah, I think he really cares too. Like he's really passionate about the game. Like the one game they lost at home against Arizona State, another close game, a game they obviously probably should have won, but he had an open three to win the game in the dying seconds and missed it. And he was really visibly upset after the game. Like he was really shaken by that. And that at that point they had lost 9 or 10 games. Like this was only a couple games ago. So he really cares, and I think that's something that you like to see as well. He was a guy I was always going to be high on just with his skill set coming into CU, but I've been impressed that he's able to do even more than I expected as a freshman. But the other guy I think you really want to, and not like I say this, like I don't think they should get rid of everybody on the roster that's not, bar like 3 or 4 guys. Like I do think there are some guys you want to keep around, but you are going to have to, whether it's encourage guys to transfer or whatever, like you're going to have to create some roster flexibility so you can look in the portal and try to add more talent and more diverse skill sets in a different way. But there's a couple other guys I wanted to hit on. Like Banggot Dak, I think is really starting to flourish now. He was a guy I expected to take a leap this year, and he got off to a pretty rough start, I felt like. But he's starting to really lean into the defense and the rebounding now. He obviously needs to beef up in the offseason and continue to add weight to his frame. But him and Felix Caceres, I think, are the 2 other guys that I would really be trying to keep around and making sure that they don't get poached by a bigger program. Because I think Felix, despite the inconsistent minutes, has shown some flashes of the stuff you want to see as well. His shot is another one that is still a work in progress, but I like the way he attacks the rim as well. I like the way he moves the ball on the perimeter. He's never really keeping it too often. Like he's really trying to keep the ball moving and keep the defense on its toes. I do think he's got high level of defensive upside on the perimeter as well. It's like a 6'5", 6'4", 6'5"-ish guard that has a long wingspan and really competes on that end. So those are the other 2 guys I wanted to hit on. Like, what do you think of? I'm sure you feel pretty similarly about those guys going forward as well.
Yeah, Felix, obviously we're working with a pretty small sample with Felix, but I'm right there with you. I think now, obviously, Tad is like just trying to get a win in that last game. But now that they're on the board, I would like to see Felix a little bit more, just to get him some reps, just to see what he could do with some extended run. I thought he had some nice moments against Houston, especially in the first half. He had an ugly turnover in the second half.
Yeah,
that was the end of his day. But I thought he had some nice moments early on in that one. So I definitely would like to see him back. I'd like to see him, with a little bit more opportunity. And I've really liked Banggot this year as well. I think he's just calmed down a little bit, especially offensively. I think it's slowing down a little bit for him. I think he's settling into kind of who he is. Like, I'm going to be a lob threat and an offensive rebound guy. And like, I think a lot of the stuff earlier in the year, which, they still do some of this, but where he was like catching the ball at the elbow and being like a hub. And that's where you got like 3 turnovers and a half. And it was like, everything's just moving so fast for him.
3 turnovers in 3 minutes sometimes too.
Yeah. And 3 turnovers and a half because they come in 3 minutes and then you wouldn't see him for the rest of the half. I do think it's slowing down for him, though, and I think he's kind of understanding what his role is. He still will jump into the first row on a pump fake sometimes, which
He
is
should never be the first guy off the floor. Like, he's
no.
just so long and so
Yes.
athletic. He just never needs to be the first guy off the floor.
Yeah. But he'll get better at that. And I do like you said, the defense I think is really coming along. I still think that he is a good passer for his position. And I think that you're starting to see that more and more now that the game is slowed down a little bit and it's less of the bad when it comes to like the turnovers and the playmaking, and you're getting more of like the nice dump offs and the nice high-low stuff. So I like that with him. And he's a fun watch, man. That dude is a freak. He is a freaky athlete. So definitely I would like to see him stick around. We'll see what happens with the shot. He will take some shots from the outside. I don't think that that's what anybody loves, especially Tad. But the fact that he has the confidence to at least take a couple, I think, is a good sign. So I would like to see him back. There's a couple other guys. I like RJ too. We've talked about this before. I don't know that RJ is like a starter in the Big 12, but I do like him as a guy that can come off the bench and be an extra guard, and he can knock down some shots.
Hasn't done that as much lately, but he definitely early in the season was more of an automatic knockdown catch and shoot guy.
Yeah. So that's another guy that I wouldn't mind seeing back. I don't know about Asan. I did think he was good on Saturday.
Yeah, 10 rebounds. Yeah, he rebounded the ball well.
Yeah, but I'm right there with you where Sebi Ronchik and Bangot and Felix are like the three main guys that have been in the rotation this year.
Yeah.
Obviously, you've got the younger guys who aren't playing, but out of the rotation, those are really the three guys that I would really like to see back.
Yeah, and like we haven't gotten to see any of Andrew Crawford this year because he's obviously taken the redshirt year. So I don't think they're going to cut bait with him right after this year. Like it's a limited sample size. I haven't been able to get up there for practice as much this season, and he's obviously on the scout team. But the stuff I saw at Thunder Ridge, here in Colorado was the stuff I still see in practice, and that still leaves me open to keeping him around. But the three guys you talked about, so Ronchik, Dak, and Caceres, you add in Crawford, and then maybe one of the other guys. The other guys to me are just all mid-major guys that would be better suited for a smaller program, like RJ Smith, who was more impressive at the beginning of the season. Asan might be a similar vein. Same for Courtney Anderson, probably, who definitely feels like a guy that will probably leave at the end of the year. And Harrison Carrington as well feels like a guy that is just a mid-major player. And so that leaves you 3 open spots if all those guys leave and you add in the 5 freshmen, where you can really play around in the portal and try to add maybe 1 or 2 impact guys and then another Tad player. Like Tad can get his guys, one for me, one for the team kind of thing. Or you can have a better shot at competing in the Big 12 in the second season, which, this is always going to be an adjustment year, like we've talked about. Like it was just going to – this league is just so good, and we've talked about the reasons why it is. And I want to wrap up a little bit by talking about the Big 12 as a whole, because even though there's only a couple teams in the Mountain Time Zone in the conference, it's just a really fun league that you and I watch all the time. And it feels like there's been plenty of really, really good games as of late, and plenty that are going to be coming forward. That Houston-Arizona game the other day was an awesome game, and it was the first time that in a while that like the McHale Magic didn't come out for Arizona. They weren't able to get the win. They got a nice win last night at Baylor, which on a short rest, which was impressive. I still like that Baylor team. I don't know.
I do too.
I'm still a VJ Edgecombe guy. I think he's going to be a stud. But just kind of quickly before we get out of here, who is Houston the top team for you right now? Like I thought for a while it was Iowa State, but I feel like Houston maybe has taken the mantle at this point, or who are you kind of eyeing as we get closer to March here?
I think Houston's the best team. I think that Iowa State's bigs don't necessarily give them enough offensively in some games, and that's like you saw.
They're super reliant on the guards for
I think you saw that a lot in the Kansas game. They lost. They got beat pretty bad at Kansas. They lost a Kansas State game too, which was just weird.
That was a home game that they weirdly lost.
Kansas State is like their own thing. They could be anything on any day.
Yeah.
But I like the balance that Houston has. I like Cryer and Sharp on the perimeter, obviously, but
Yep.
I think that we saw it in person here. What Jawan Roberts can do for them in the half court now, which is crazy to watch as someone who watched a lot. I watch a lot of Houston every year. I love
Yeah.
the way Houston plays. They're one of my
Yeah.
favorite.
We're both Houston sickos. We
We're
have
big
been for a
Houston
while.
guys. As someone who watched Jawan Roberts play like at the start of his career, and now I'm like, man, I cannot believe that he has figured out how to do all of this
A
stuff.
guy who stayed at the school for 5 years now.
He's-
Like I think fifth or
yeah,
sixth year there. Yeah.
it's amazing to watch him. I still am slightly concerned that uh, they will run into the wrong set of refs in the tournament, and that's just like it almost happened to them against A&M in that crazy second round game last year, where it's like, all right, everybody has 4 fouls, like because that's just the way that they play. And if they get somebody who's calling it tight, I think that might be an issue for them. I do like Arizona. I think it's really impressive what Tommy Lloyd has done without Krivas and getting Henry Vasar, who was just awesome last night.
Yeah.
In that Baylor game, and Awaka's playing really well for them inside. The Caleb Love thing still, is always like
We've talked about that together for
you're
years now.
You're one Caleb Love off the rails half from going home in March. But then, sometimes he'll hit a 60-footer to send the game to overtime, and then
in a game he didn't play well at all.
That was the most this is a tangent, but that was nothing. No game is more Caleb Love than that. He was like 1 for 10 from 3. He makes a half-court shot to send the game into overtime and is just immediately on fire.
He made like 3 threes in the first 2 minutes of overtime. Yeah.
But I do like them. I like they've got a bunch of guards who I think are good players. KJ Lewis, Jaden Bradley.
I'm a big Jaden Bradley guy. I like him a lot.
I thought they would get more out of Trey Townsend this year, but I love Carlos Bryant, the freshman. I think he's played really well for them. So I think that I do really like that team with the bigs playing the way that they are. Iowa State is a weird one. We both really like Iowa State. I like the way they defend, but
I can't quit them.
I can't either. But I am worried about the bigs in some matchups where it's going to be tougher for the guards to score. I'm just worried, like, what are you getting out of some of the bigs? And then, we talked about Baylor, who I really like the Baylor team. And the whole year I was kind of like, well, they're going to get healthy. Roach was banged up.
Mm-hmm.
Langston Love was banged up. I was like, and now they're healthy. And it kind of looks the same. And I'm like, no, it'll come around. Like, I do really like VJ Edgecombe, though. Another just rim pressure beast. And I admire Norchad Omier fighting every single 7-footer in the conference as just like 36 minutes a game. I do think I'm blanking his name. They lost the backup big.
I forget his name, but I know who you're talking about.
Their backup big, I think he's a 7-footer. He's a big guy. They lost him. I think he's out for the season. That is a killer for them because they're just so undersized with Omier, who is still a good rebounder at his size. He can still score down low, but I think defensively, teams that can get to the rim really will hurt them because of that, because they don't. Scott Drew doesn't really have another option. Like, he was doing a lot of zone last night to try and help some of that. That was a fun chess match last night with him and Tommy. Tommy was doing the 3/4 court trap thing. But so I still like Baylor. I like their guards. I like Rob Wright a lot. Jeremy Roach is Jeremy Roach in a positive way in the tournament. Experience, he's going to settle everything down. But I really think as far as like contenders, I really think it's Arizona, Iowa State, Houston, and Texas Tech with JT Toppin, who is just on an absolute rampage right now.
Yeah, I actually think Texas Tech might be the second best team in the conference. Like, it's still going to be tough for me to come around on Arizona just with the Caleb Love thing going in March. And the Kansas thing, like, Hunter Dickinson, I'm happy for whatever his European career is going to be going forward, but I have never really felt like he was that much of a winning player, even in college, despite all of the numbers he puts up. and the fact that he's going to be like a 4-time All-American after this year, which just feels wrong to me. But outside of Houston, I do think Texas Tech maybe even has taken Iowa State's spot for me as the second best team. Like you said, JC Toppin is a monster and has been playing so good. Like, I was so impressed with him last season at New Mexico. Like, he was maybe the fourth best player on the. I don't think he was the fourth best player, but he was like the fourth option on that New Mexico team last year, behind the two smaller guards and Donovan Dent. But he is just, the way he's been playing in Big 12 play has been ridiculous. Darian Williams is another former Mountain West guy. He was at Nevada. He's played really well. And Chance McMillian, that's a really interesting what if for CU. One of those guys.
He's a stud, man.
Yeah, a Grand Canyon guy that CU hosted on a visit in out of the portal 2 years ago at this point, and they thought they had a chance of getting him, but he went to Texas Tech, and that's a really fascinating what if, because he could be the guy that CU is really looking for on the perimeter. But I'm with you. I think it's Houston definitely number one, and then probably Texas Tech and Iowa State for me, with all season long because of the Yegor Demon of it all. But it should be a fun, Big 12 tournament when that comes around in about 3 weeks. So
Kansas is a weird one, man. They're a weird one. So will Tad Boyle's portal experience be completely ruined if he finally finds a big time scorer to recruit and it ends up like AJ Storr?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Is like the portal, you can have so many hits and misses. Like, I thought Kansas was going to be a top 5 team in the country this year with all the portal guys they got. Like Zeke Mayo, I thought he would be a guy that CU would go after, but he was clearly at a level they couldn't afford pretty early in the portal. But just a bunch of these guys that you felt really good about. They were building this kind of superstar roster. Now, like you said, AJ Storr just like casually comes off the bench for them now after being Wisconsin's best player for the last 2 years.
He really comes off the bench. Like this, it's
he's like the 8th guy.
25 minutes a game off the bench. Like it's, hey, can you give me 8 good minutes here, please?
Yeah, they're just a fascinating team, and that kind of we'll wrap up here by hitting some of the games we're looking forward to this week. I'm hoping to do another episode later this week with more of a Mountain West angle to it, because there's some big games this weekend. But just looking ahead at tonight, I mean, Kansas at BYU is going to be a big game. I feel like, CU and CSU are both in action tonight. I'm going to try to get up to Fort Collins, barring the weather, to try to watch them play Nevada, who has not had that great of a season. But CU at Iowa State, that's probably going to be a loss. Although Kansas State beat them there, so who knows? But those two teams are both in action. And then, like I said, BYU, Kansas tonight is going to be an interesting game. Anything you're looking for in particular there? Like, BYU has played better lately, and obviously they have the home court advantage. The Marriott Center is really good, and Provo will be rocking for that game.
Yeah, it's a tough place to play up at BYU. That's a team, they're playing a lot better recently. They got a really nice win over West Virginia in a big bubble game. That was a really good game. So I do think that they're kind of starting to figure out how to win some games. Igor is playing a little bit better. He played really well in the non-conference against the not-so-good teams, and then got into the Big 12 and did not play well against the better teams. But he is figuring it out. He was good in that West Virginia game. So I'm excited to see him against all of the talent that Kansas has. And then, Kansas is they just feel like they're trying to find it. And it just feels incredibly, they feel like Kansas last year, even with like an almost entirely different group of players outside of Dickinson and KJ Adams and DeJuan Harris. But it feels like there's something missing. Like the Utah loss was rough. Rough, but Utah plays well at home. So I'm curious to see another tough place to play for Kansas. Can they? Because like even it's amazing that we just had the whole conversation about the Big 12 and Kansas didn't come up as one of the contenders. Like it was Kansas is clearly a tier down from those 4 teams that we mentioned at the top. We know that they are talented enough to move up into that group, but they're running out of time. So another hostile environment. I'm excited to see if they can kind of start to click it together here. Yeah,
and last game I wanted to hit, Boise State versus New Mexico tomorrow night should be a fun game. It's still crazy to me that New Mexico's only loss in Mountain West play is at San Jose State. It was a 1-point game. and I mean, San Jose State's better than I expected this year, but that's still just a wild factor. Like they beat Utah, they swept Utah State, they swept CSU. They could sweep Boise. You know, they play at San Diego State next week, but it's just a fast. They're just. I think New Mexico is just a cut above the rest of the Mountain West at this point of the season. But Boise's turned it around lately, I feel like, and that could be an interesting game late Wednesday night there. Boise, like I said, Boise's played better lately after they really – when I watched them in person at CSU last month, like it was kind of rock bottom for them. They had lost like 4 out of 6 games. They were down by like 20 at one point against the Rams. But now they won 4 straight before losing at San Diego State the other day, and they're looking for kind of a bounce back. So that should be an interesting game tomorrow night. Troy, I know you're plugged into the Mountain West like me as well.
Yeah, New Mexico's a weird one because they play so well against good teams. That game with them in Utah State on Sunday was excellent. But then, you mentioned the San Jose State game. They should have lost that Nevada game at the pit way back when Joseph hit the buzzer beater when the ball's rolling around on the ground. Yeah. They probably should have lost the Wyoming game last weekend?
Yeah.
They played Wyoming at the pit.
At home, yeah.
Yeah, Wyoming was beating them. So they're an interesting one, but I do really enjoy watching them. We are longtime Donovan Dent fans here.
Donovan Dent truthers, yes.
I'm a big Donovan Dent guy. Love watching him play. And, we'll see. I hope that they can make some noise in the tournament because their team last year deserved better than getting blown out in the first half of the first round. So,
yeah, I always said last season, as soon as they realize Donovan Dent's their best player and not Jamal Mashburn Jr. or Jalen House, they will be an Elite 8 team because I thought they were that good last year because I like JT Toppin too. But they've kind of just replaced JT Toppin with Nelly Jr. Joseph and let Donovan Dent kind of run the show with guys like True Washington. I like Mustafa Amzil as well. They have a bunch of really, really solid players. And it feels like they're a team that could make the second weekend, which would be fun for them. Totally. But that'll do it from the second episode here. Troy, thanks for coming on. And I'm sure I'll see you sometime soon at a CU game, maybe this Saturday against Baylor. I think I'll be there for that one.
Definitely. Yeah. Thanks, Tyler. Really appreciate you having me on. Had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure you'll be a regular guest here, especially as we get into the you can rant about the Nuggets when the playoffs come around as well. Right. But we'll talk more. I'll have you back on once the NCAA tournament gets closer, as you and I you're the person I talk to the most just about the national picture. So thanks again for coming on.
Of course, man. Thank you. Anytime.